Hello.
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 How are you?
Hey, happy Wednesday, everyone.
People are still hopping on, so we'll give people another minute or so. How's everyone doing?
As good as can be.
Right? It's always a qualified answer anymore.
All right. Well, I guess we can go ahead and get started while people join. Kelly, I'm going to make you a co-host if that works.
Sure, that works fine.
You can help me with the waiting room.
Absolutely.
Cool. Excellent. All right. Well, today I'm really excited to have Christy Metropole here with us to talk about community cats. We're also joined by Monica Friendin. And I'll just let you both introduce yourselves if that sounds good. Christy, do you want to start?
Sure. I thought I was talking about kittens, but I'd rather talk about community cats. I'm the CEO of Stray Cat Alliance here in Los Angeles, and we do lots of community cat programming, kitten programming, lots of work in underserved communities where we have shelter staff embedded, doing return to field, which we are renaming, Monica's on the bandwagon, return to home for community cats. By the way, I was interviewed by the Orange County Register, one of the largest newspapers and pretty influential in Southern California. And that's what I called it. And I didn't have to explain it. I didn't have to say, return to field, shelter. I don't understand what. I was like, return to home for community cats. Super simple. It was awesome. So anyway, is that enough of an intro?
Yeah, you're very modest. Christy is really leading the way for kitten programming and community cat programming, and has changed the landscape of Los Angeles from being very bleak to having a lot of hope and programming there. So thank you, Christy, for all that you do. Monica, you want to introduce yourself for those of us that don't know you?
Sure. My name is Monica Friendin. I'm the Maddie's Director of Feline Lifesaving at American Pets Alive, and working with Haas. And I'm going to plug Christy some more because she's been a fellow feral cat lady for a long time. And we're going to talk about kittens today, so maybe we can definitely talk about feral kittens and community kittens, because I know that's a hot topic. But another one of my favorite programs that Christy runs and really pioneered out at Stray Cat Alliance is the Safe at Home program of not necessarily bringing those kittens into the shelter to be intaked, and how you turn finder to foster, how you actually make that happen on a very large scale in Los Angeles, out in California. So all the kudos to Christy, one of my colleagues on the community cat work group at Haas.
All right. So Christy, do you want to tell us just what's been happening recently in Los Angeles, and then we can get into kitten programming, which we've promised everybody here as well. But I do want to leave some space for what you all are accomplishing in LA. Will you give us a little background?
Yeah, just give me a time limit because there's a lot. So I don't know if recently you all know, but for 11 years we lived under the TNR injunction in the city of Los Angeles, which meant the shelter couldn't participate in trap, neuter, return. It didn't mean individuals, but it put a gag order on any progressive programming and any funding, and it was really, really harmful. So finally, after 11 years and lots of people fighting it, the city came up with an environmental impact report, and part of that is called the city-wide cat program, which has lots of components. And one of them is they decided that for proper reduction of cats in the community, the city would pay for 20,000 spays and neuters a year for 30 years, yet they don't have any money. So we're all SOL on that, but we're working on it and playing with it. But this is monumental. It has completely changed our programming because we lived under a gag order, and we have safe at home shelter staff embedded at the South LA shelter, which is one of the most economically challenged communities probably in the country. And we weren't allowed to talk about spay neuter and TNR, but we did it for 4 or 5 years. And the city attorney allowed us to intercede on behalf of kittens 8 weeks and under, because they could kind of figure that no one was they were afraid we were gonna TNR. So, so we've been doing that, and it's highly successful. And the 3 things I always say is, when we started it, people said, those people don't care about cats. People who get to the shelter, they've already made up their mind, and those people don't believe in spay and neuter. And it turned out that none of those were true. Yes, there are people that believe that, but for the most part, our conversion rate is about 50%. So 50% of people who walk up to the front door of the South LA shelter with kittens, we can talk them into taking them home. It is an underserved community, so they do need the food, the formula, and all of that. And we mentor them, and we spay and neuter, and it's a very comprehensive, not super cheap, but comprehensive and sort of lifelong program that changes the landscape. And families are involved. And now that the injunction is lifted, just tell me to shut up, Rory, whenever you need me to. But now that the injunction is lifted, we get to intervene on all cats. So cats coming in traps, cats coming in carriers. People say, I have a cat, I don't know what to do about spay and neuter. We get to talk about it. So we're actually like redoing a lot of our programming and systems, because we kind of don't know exactly what to do with all of that. So it's super exciting and challenging. And we're going to dovetail or marry that program with Return to Home for Community Cats, because we have people at the shelter. So if someone comes to impound a community cat, we're like, oh, if you go there under door number 1, we happen to have an ASPCA spay neuter clinic on the grounds, and they're amazing. And we're trying to work, you can get that cat fixed. Leave the cat here. We'll do it. You'll bring the cat back. So that sort of circumvents all. There's a bunch of boiling lawsuits, and already a filed lawsuit against San Diego Humane against their community cat return to field programming. The same people who stopped the Orange County Animal Care community cat programming, which we ran, which we returned 2,000 cats in 1 year. No TNR, that was just the return. And it had stopped because of a threat of a lawsuit. So these people now have filed a lawsuit against San Diego, just out for the glory. They have no stake in what really is going on. And but thank God it's San Diego Humane, because they got a lot of money and they have amazing leadership. So if anyone can fight them, San Diego Humane can fight them.
So this is really monumental. I mean, this has been such an ongoing fight, Christy, that you've been fighting day by day, right? So I just want to congratulate you. I know how huge this is, and it's really a victory, not just for you, but for the cats. And I really think for communities everywhere. If we can sort of figure out how you figured out how to win this fight, we need that across the country, it seems.
Thank you. And what our switching, we're like, well, what do we do in COVID? And we're not we exited Long Beach Animal Care Services. Michelson Found Animals paid for us to be there for 7 years. Their kill rate was about they were saving about 20% when we got there. They have an incredible leader as of the last 2 years, Stacey Dane. So she gets a lot of the credit, but we exited, they had a 97% save rate for cats, not combined.
Wow.
Cats. And Stacey's like, we couldn't have done it if we didn't have this robust Return to Home for Community Cats and robust out. We did outreach for 7 years. Door hangers. This cat is coming back. They're spayed and neutered. We get almost no pushback now. Like the whole Long Beach knows this is the deal. So we exited that. Where do we go? And now we're really working towards supporting the citywide cat program, because if Los Angeles can make the citywide cat program, which is an official city program with official TNR paid for by the second largest city in the country, that's going to have monumental impact on the whole country, I think.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
so that's our goal.
So Chris asked a really good question, and I want to ask this question and then add also a kitten component to it so that we give people what we've promised them. But how can we encourage our local groups to provide similar triage and intake diversion in our communities and for kittens?
Are you asking me?
I am.
Oh. I know I've spoken to Chris about this. So what I've also learned, like I'm still learning and growing and going, yeah, I think I'm gonna do that differently, is, you know, we're not by any means a large nonprofit. We're like a medium considered by budget. We're a little bit bigger for an animal. We're not, you know, we're not best friends or whatever, but I am I'm learning that really activating and engaging the very small, very local groups is actually very powerful, because they're going to sustain the programming, well, for us when we leave. So Long Beach, we've left, but there's lots of activated local groups, and the shelter's very involved. Not that there isn't problems with, you know, sometimes, a lot of times our biggest headaches are people who think they understand sheltering, have the best of intentions, and they're a nightmare, right? So, but activating these local groups to sustain the work. We have not perfected it, Chris, but we're working on it. We're really working with smaller groups, helping them. I worked with some groups up in Ventura County, and they were like, we're losing our minds, and the shelter's not taking in every cat now, and they're returning these cats. And they're like, and I was like, you know what? You're not going to be able to TNR every cat. You're not going to be able to do it, and that's okay. But you could have a trap depot, and you could maybe raise some money and have a coordinator to answer the phone, and you could all teach people how to trap. And they were like, oh, I mean, this is actually not an underserved community, but very dedicated to cats. And they were like losing their minds. And I was helping them get a structure so that they could duplicate and replicate and scale what they do. And it went really well, and they were really attacking the shelter. And I was there as a buffer, as one of them, by the way. So I was one of them, and I really played that up, that I'm one of you. And the shelter cannot do everything. And yes, shelters need to change some of their ways, 100%. But we also have to participate in that change. And we have to work with the shelter, not, I mean, sometimes you do have to go on a campaign to get rid of people. That works. But sometimes you really actually don't want to get rid of the people. They're doing the best they can in a bureaucracy. Support them to do the right thing. So, you know, we just work with them for a short time, and I really explain that we're like you, and the shelter, this is a really actually good shelter director. You're very lucky to have her. And she said that it really changed things, because they were heard and they had some solutions, and they were sort of let off the hook. Because you guys know, there's a lot of cats. There's a lot more cats than dogs. It's very difficult. It's a difficult situation.
Christy, I have a question on kittens.
Yes, ma'am.
How is Stray Cat Alliance picking which kittens you are returning to home and which kittens you are intaking or sending through Safe at Home?
So the kittens that go through Safe at Home are, well, up until this year, were strictly 8 weeks and under. So they were taken in either by the person who brought them. Sometimes they're impounded, or sometimes we would find what we call an SCA, a stray cat foster, which is like someone else. So those kittens would never get returned. In the Return to Home for Community Cats programming, we weren't really returning many kittens, but maybe older kittens that definitely, they had a mother, they had a family. We wouldn't just throw, you know, a single kitten in an alley that we had no idea. So we would do it with care and thoughtfulness. We haven't had to do a lot of it though. I will tell you that. Now that intake is, I don't know what's going to happen this year with intake, right? It was so low last year, it was totally doable. So I don't know what's going to happen. And so we're going to play it by ear and take the kittens we can. There's a lot of other groups who are helping. And so we only take from the South LA shelter and the LA City shelters right now, and from one city in Garden Grove.
Do you have a minimum age for the kittens before you would put them in the SNR or return to home program?
We have done 3 months, but probably more people are more comfortable with 4 months. Spayed and neutered, healthy, with a family.
I have a non-kitten question. Do you want that?
Sure.
It's community cats. I know you like it. You had one of the worst ordinance obstacles in the country, roadblocking your community cat programming in your work. It's really common all across the country. So many rescuers and shelters are battling that, right? What tips do you have on how do we circumnavigate those quietly in the shadows and in the dark? How do you do, because you were very, very active still doing community cat programming during the injunction. What are your pro tips for, because I know people on this call right now are doing the same thing. If we've got the same barriers, we have the same obstacles, how do we navigate that, not get in trouble, but still get our work done?
Boy, what a great question. So you have to be tenacious and you have to be creative. And, you know, we could do TNR, but we just couldn't do it on city property, and the city couldn't have traps. So I'll just give an example. Now that the injunction's been lifted, I can say this, and I won't use names. There was a clinic that was not supposed to do any kind of a trap that is actually in the injunction. But I would go to the shelter and I'd see them carry transfer traps just for the regular cats at the shelter. And I'm like, well, hello. So I said to the clinic, if we bring you cat, they'll ear tip, right? If we bring you cats in a transfer cage, will you fix them? And they went to their lawyers and they're like, yeah, we'll do it. So we used to bring a lot of unsocial cats, we just didn't bring them in a trap. And they were in a transfer cage, which looks like a trap. And nobody could tell because the officers were walking around in the ACTs with these transfer cages for other cats. So we got super creative. You know, we worked around it where we could. I mean, we didn't talk about community cats on city property. We didn't jeopardize the Safe at Home program, the whole, for being able to do that. So we did definitely pick our battles. You know, I'm just trying to think of what else. That was mostly, it was the spay neuter component on city property, because all those spay neuter clinics are at some of our LA City shelters. So they were not allowed to fix feral cats.
Were you waiting at the property line trying to lure them over so you could get them?
We thought about having some of our team on the other side of the street, but
yeah, I've done that plenty of times. Come just this side of the fence. All you need to do. Yeah. Chris put in another good question of, so absent you coming to every community to mediate, should organizations try to recruit and really nurture a relationship with their 1 to 2 kind of most aligned groups that are working with them? How would you navigate that?
Yeah, you know, I really I did the thing in the other county, and I've actually helped some other, and then we were on like one of the house calls, and someone from somewhere in North Carolina, and she's like the second in command, and she was just talking about her very close relationship with all the TNR groups and how they rely on them. And it was such a great symbiosis there. And I don't know, you may have even been on the call, Monica, and I was like, wait, we need to talk to this woman. And the whole Haas call was about her relationship with these TNR groups.
It's been really interesting. I've been working with another California shelter going through the same thing where we've got all these, our partners pushing back on community cat programming or return to home, or really concerned about it. And so Chris's question, I think, is it's affecting a whole lot of shelters all across the country. And what we did in California was really bring those few very, very involved stakeholders to the table during the process of recreating cat flow and cat pathways through the shelter. So we physically had to come in and say, here's a document that we're looking at making, pick it apart, throw every comment and concern you have at it, and let's sit down and work through it together. So we come up with something that we're all comfortable with. And a lot of it is they wanted to be heard, and they wanted buy-in to a process that they've committed thousands of hours and dollars and effort to. And I think that helped. But yeah, it was the one or two really active groups that were partners. And I feel like they really appreciated. Several of them flat out emailed and said, thank you, we just wanted to be heard. And we want input into the process. This is our community too. We love these cats. And so it built a nice partnership out of something that started pretty contentious. And we said, here's some buy-in, here's our challenges, tell us yours, and let's just talk. And it went well.
Some of the rescuers, if you want to use that word for lack of a better word, are not realistic. And they have a preconceived notion that every single cat needs to be in a house, and every single cat, blah. I mean, when the entities that threatened Orange County Animal Care, by the way, prior to COVID, I think that was the 5th largest intake shelter in the country, and we had robust programming there. They got a lot of people's ire up because they said they're throwing adoptable cats in the street. That's what they used. And so they stopped the programming. And now, of course, they want us back. And I'm like, yeah, well, I had a ton of funding and now it's gone. So, and then now those same people are going after San Diego Humane using that very inflammatory language. And believe me, I had donors, especially older donors, going, did you hear what San Diego Humane is doing? I'm like, okay, let's pull this apart. And I would go through it with them, and then they'd be like, oh, but I think a lot of people, rescuers and people, they don't understand, well, this is just universal, right? They don't understand the issue. They don't really understand that adoptable isn't really anything. It's, these are cats that were living outside and they're going back to where they were living, and, you know, the whole 9 yards.
So some of that inflammatory language that we're hearing is that you're abandoning those cats. The shelter is guilty of abandonment.
Abandoning adoptable. So in their mind, somebody's cat who lived on, you know, the couch is being thrown in the street. And I'm trying to explain that's actually not what's happening at all. That's not the narrative. Those owner surrenders are not part of a return to home for community cats because they're not community cats. So language is important, right?
Yeah. Erica had a really good question in the chat too about recommendations on your partner groups that don't believe in return to home, and they feel that every kitten should be taken in. So kittens and friendlies are the hot button topic. And the chat is reflecting that it's kittens and friendlies. The overwhelming feeling from the public, according to every shelter I work with, is that the public wants every friendly cat and every kitten rescued.
Right.
So what's your messaging been at Stray Cat Alliance to educate?
Well, you know, a really good person to talk about that is Anna Wong, who did return to home for community cats for us for 7 years. And she was returning cats and talking to community members, and people were like, oh, there's my cat, I didn't know. And so there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of people picking up cats. We talk about in underserved communities, the municipal codes are very much stacked against people. You don't have the same issues in wealthy communities. And sometimes these cats have multiple people who really care about them. Listen, if they're not thriving, they don't look good, they're very elderly, they're sick, they're thin, it's a different story. But if they're thriving and they're friendly, they probably have someone, or maybe quite a few, who care about them. And again, like, I'm not the draconian, all this way and all that way. That's not where I come from in my philosophy of life. There are situations where it's not appropriate to put a cat back. It's not safe. The building went down, whatever. But there are, Stacey Daines, who started the first in the West Coast in San Jose. She was the director of operations at San Jose Animal Care, heard about what they were doing in Florida. This is like forever ago. And she would see, and she talks about this, at the shelter, she would see people who came in for spay, neuter, and TNR walk down the hall with traps and turn left. And cats who were impounded, they walk down the hall and they turn right to the room where they were put down. And she's like, this is crazy. It like doesn't make any sense. And so the disposition of a cat, I don't know if it has as much bearing as we think it does. It's just a pretty deep conversation. And, you know, do you want to just be taking people's cats away from them? Do you not want to go into that community like we do and say, cats spayed and neutered, what are your questions? And they have a lot of questions. And sometimes they're really happy to get their cats back. And we know return to owner rate is less than 1%. So, you know, for the 100 cats that come in, 1 gets returned to owner. Let's return them all to owner. And I love when I go to shelters, and this is happening in LA City right now. It's super exciting. They're not super overloaded, and they're doing all kinds of cool things. They're doing surgeries and ringworm. And you can't imagine. They are treating ringworm at the South LA shelter. Like, if you had told me that 10 years ago, I would say that is never going to happen, but they can. So you're saving those cats by releasing appropriate cats that should be returned to their communities. It's about resources, right? Also.
It's definitely about resources, and Karen in the comment in the chat has a question that I get all the time. My community has a really high save rate. The shelter's empty. Why shouldn't we take those friendly cats in?
I mean, I think it's the same, go to another community where they don't have a high save rate, right? I think it's,
yeah, I'm of that belief too, of like,
come to Los Angeles.
5 miles down the road, that community would love for you to help them.
Right.
But this is a common concern. We've got a very high save rate. We are a very resourced community. Why do we need to put those cats back on the street?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they're going back to people that care about them. They're spayed and neutered. They're healthy, and the education is paramount for us. As I said, we do door hangers, probably, I don't know, in 7 years, hundreds of thousands of door hangers, conversations. Well, now the shelter under the direction of Stacy is so progressive and life-saving. They're really a resource, which is, you know, so amazing. So it's very different. It's very different, you know.
Yeah, it's even in shelters that are very, very well off, it's always comes down to resources, because they're finite no matter what. And I like
no matter what.
Even in our very privileged shelters, those finite resources could be put to more proactive solutions like TNR, so that we're ultimately getting to the same goal of less outdoor cats of any temperament. And that would be in a less punitive model, right? Because we know that punitive models don't work in animal welfare, and stealing people's cats is pretty punitive. And it breaks the bond of trust between the shelter and the community, which is an even bigger issue. When you steal a pet, they don't trust you anymore. They're not going to partner with your shelter and proactively bring in community cats for spay, neuter, and get things microchipped. It's damaging our relationship with our communities when we do that. And then, of course, we have the whole concept of how this disproportionately affects marginalized communities when we indiscriminately round up people's pets.
Yeah. So, and that's really true that, you know, the animals are in communities where there aren't resources, and why, let's spend our time somewhere else. How about animal ACOs go and TNR all day instead of having to like pick up? And I mean, I know that they have important jobs and they do a lot of things that need to happen, but let's change the appropriation of their time and have less cats in general. I mean, there's so many things about that.
I love Erica's comment that she said that's what we're looking at doing, active trapping and return to home, now that we only have 5 to 10 cats in house at a time.
Who said that?
we literally just had this conversation a couple days ago, and we're going to meet as management team that, you know, we stopped actively trapping cats like a decade ago. And then, you know, we've been taking stuff off our animal control officer's plate all along. And, you know, so we stopped picking up friendly contained strays and said, you can take them to the shelter and we'll RTF them, but, you know, engaging the community that way. And now it's like, you know what, there's people that aren't going to do that. So maybe now we need to enlist our animal control officers and actually start a program that we can support, because we now have the resources, because we don't have 80 cats or 100 cats in our building like we used to.
Yeah, so that's what Stacy is doing in Long Beach. My staff member, the last 2 years, she has spent training them. Of course, they didn't want to. There was union issues, but Stacy got through it. They've been returning. The officers are now returning, and Anna's teaching them about the conversation, and also I've been on like so many of these seminars and webinars and talks. I kind of, did I say this? But I don't think so. Over 2 years, we developed the questionnaire that's at the front desk, because you need good data from the people bringing in animals. And a lot of the time we found that the staff are not trained, it's not a priority, maybe they've been doing, you know, a different way. So at Long Beach, we created a questionnaire, which of course we're happy to share, but it's really about the conversation, the interactive conversation about taking the cats back. Because if the person bringing in the cat fixes the cat and returns them, you circumvent all those legal abandoned. Well, in California, it's 597S, as in Sam, of the penal code. It's abandonment. It was really, you know, sort of spruced up in 2008 in the economic decline, and people were abandoning. They were, but it's like really bitten us in the ass, right? So, but when you do that, that's how these lawsuits are getting their teeth, is 597S. So if you circumvent that, you can, you know, circumvent the whole problem. So yeah, it's about resources. And why should municipal shelter be the only resource to, you know, there's gonna be neighbors whose litters have kitten. There's gonna be Craigslist of I found a kitten. And let's let the shelters do this really great life-saving programming, and maybe adopt out some cats too, you know?
One more question down in the chat from Mia. So I'm gonna steal part of this, but Mia asks, what are 3 great points to convince people that a cat is a community cat and not a friendly? But a community cat can be of any temperament. Community cat simply means we live predominantly outside. So friendly cats are community cats too. But 3 great points to convince people that it's a community cat and maybe not a lost or an abandoned cat. How do you know?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about that, and I've been talking about that with my team, because you don't want to return an abandoned cat. You don't want to throw a cat whose person has moved out back in the street. That is not okay. And you have to be careful. And there probably are some people who do this kind of work that are not as careful as others. And there are some like us, and we're like meticulous. I mean, my team, I went out with them one day, and we were actually filming, and we followed my team, and they pulled up to this apartment building, and I was sitting in the car with the videographer, and I saw that they were, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, we're not sure the cats really came from here. I don't see any signs of other cats. I don't see any feeding. So they took the cats back to the shelter, had the shelter director call the phone number and have a real conversation with the person who turned in the cats. And it was indeed the correct address, and the cats went back. But that's how careful we are. And I think you have to be that careful. I think you have to be diligent and, you know, really know that they're going to be safe and all of that. But so I think if you tell that story as well, and also pushing for the person who brought the cat in to bring the cat back, then again, you circumvent a lot of problems. If a community cat, the 3 things, so friendliness, right, has nothing to do with it. It's how do they look? Are they thriving? Are they happy? Are they relaxed? Are they healthy? That's really important. And, you know, there's the community and talking to people, and, oh yeah, I've seen that. I mean, I have community cats. I post on Instagram all the time, and, you know, and I have new ones all the time, like how far? Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about like how they look. I don't know what else. Oh, and yeah, my team is just, they need to write a book on how to do it, because there are, you know, tricks to doing it right and feeling good about that release. And another time I was with my team and they released a cat and they could tell by the way the cat was like this. And she was like, this cat does not belong here. They are not familiar. And she actually went and grabbed the cat and put the cat back. It was an abandoned cat. She was an abandoned cat. So you know, you have to be in tune with them and know, and, you know.
Will you talk about the kitten rabies vaccine document that our work group made, so that we talk about
You
kittens?
want to talk about it? We've talked about it a lot.
You're going to talk about it.
So we have a document that we've worked on, and I guess Dr. Heather from Kansas City did a lot of research, and you know, in California, we basically have no rabies, like none. But on the East Coast, I know there's a lot. So it's very different in different terrains. So I don't have that issue as much, but that it is safe to vaccinate them at 3 months.
Well, 3 months is the legal, but
At 2 months? I don't remember. I didn't know I was going to be tested.
the work group, Christy and I and all of our amazing colleagues on that work group, we heard from you guys that we're holding on to kittens for return to home because they have to be old enough for a rabies vaccine. And so what the collective has put out is they've researched it and said there's no science whatsoever to suggest that you can't vaccinate a kitten at any age and the vaccine is equally effective. It will be off-label use, like we use so many products off-label, so you won't be able to generate a legal rabies certificate. However, no kitten should leave at any age for a return to home without a rabies vaccine on board. So we have that nice document coming out that will hopefully help, because I know some of us, I've helped shelters before build barn cat enclosures where kittens could just grow up for another week or two so that they could get a rabies vaccine and then go back home, which is
A lot of work.
ridiculous. But anyway, so we have that document coming up, and it was a kitten relative question. So I wanted to throw that in there, so there's not, we're actually talking about kittens like we're supposed to be today, even though everyone always wants to talk about community cats.
That's so funny. I was also going to say about like a nonprofit. We just did for CASCAR, which is the California, it's Dr. Hurley's twice a month talk, and it's amazing. And we did almost an hour-long presentation on the Long Beach program, and you can go on her website and watch it. But you know, there's just a lot of power in a public-private partnership, and much more than I even knew. And when you, okay, that's Anna. There's much more than you could ever imagine, where you can tag team. And there are times when the animal control officer are having issues with a member of the public, and maybe their cats and their outdoor cats, and a neighbor complaining. And we can go as the mediator. And we're not threatening, and we're not the law, and we're not telling them this. And then we can make it much more, have a much better outcome as a collective. And also the public-private partnership just gives credence to both sides. And I don't know, I would, as we were doing the PowerPoint and creating it, I was like, really, this happened and this happened? And oh my God, I had no idea that it brought so much good to both sides of, so I highly recommend it. And Dr. Hurley's like, she's like, you know, you're the only partnership of that type I know in California. And I was like, really? It's very labor intensive. I don't know if I would do exactly the same way, but it's good.
Karen had a question that's making me think and go down a rabbit hole, but they'll only return a cat to home if there's a known caretaker. So we get that question a lot. Can we put a cat back if there's no known caretaker? And I know.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to know every caretaker. Caretakers are.
We operate in the shadows, a lot of us, right? And for how many cats have multiple caretakers, and you'll never see them.
You'll never see them. No, I mean, your indicator is, how does a cat look? How do they, you know, obviously.
But for kittens, you're saying you would want to see a caretaker.
I meant families like their mother and their siblings. And there were, I haven't done a ton of like return to field myself or return to home, but I've done a ton of TNR. You know, when you've TNR cats and you let them go and they run out and all their friends and their family come up and they know their home, you know that, right? And so that happens with the same thing, you know, they know their territory. So I would want the kittens. I mean, I heard a story of kittens being put in a park and there was no one around. And that's what got the ire of people. And it was a mistake. And a lot of things were done to rectify it. So that I meant families, their cat families.
We're talking so much in our industry about pathway planning for cats and picking which road these cats go down when our frontline, our intake staff, our customer service representatives are up in the front of the shelter trying to make decisions like this. How is your team making the right call for every cat? How do we do that? How do we make protocols and policies to make sure that every time we're able to quickly make that pathway decision at intake?
Well, so we don't, I mean, the only way that we would be like at South LA.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are cats that bypass us and get, you know, really, if we can engage the person, we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, you talked about, you've got that great intake form that you
Yeah.
Yeah. I just created one out in Oakland with them too. We took 4 pages of old intake documents that were asking questions that gave us no real info, and turned it into one with very open-ended, good questions. I imagine that some people on this chat would probably like to see both. So I'm going to drop my email in if you want the one that we made out in California for Oakland recently. We were rolling it out there and it's going really well with open-ended questions like, what has changed that you're bringing this cat in today?
Yeah, the one that we created for Long Beach is specifically for community cats, that whole scenario, and creates a conversation and you take the cat back and all of that. But yeah, I mean, we're happy to share that. And again, it's really about that interactive conversation, which they timed it. It's about 5 to 10 minutes a person, which is not a lot.
Yeah, and Karen put there are definitely cats that don't fit into any of the right pots, and those are the ones that get sticky. So this is definitely not a black and white issue. There are all kinds of shades of gray. And I think that's where that conversation-based intake really comes from, and knowing what good questions to ask and what's the history of this cat? What do you know about it? What's your relationship to this cat? Really good questions that we could be asking that many of us probably weren't, despite having amazing shelters or rescues or whatnot. We weren't getting great information right off the bat. And so I do think that's at the heart of helping to shed some light in those gray areas or figure out what's going on. And kittens are a sticky one. They're particularly sticky and somewhat capacity and resource dependent for every shelter, right?
Yep. Yeah, so it's like you got to pick your battle. So in Los Angeles, now that the injunction's lifted and we're allowed, you know, the 20,000, I mean, we can do more, but the city is supposed to pay for 20,000 spays and neuters above baseline, by the way. So there's a spay neuter trust fund that does a certain amount every year. This is 20,000, which is considered about 1.4 million a year for 20 years. And then there's not enough money and but we're starting with some private money and we're gonna, you know, kind of band-aid it together. And we were on a call with the city the other day and I said to Dr. Hurley, okay, we can't target TNR every cat. Who do we go for first? And we all decided, her being the, you know, scholar and the scientist, we're gonna go for the mothers of the kittens we take in. That's who we're gonna pinpoint those mothers. So when the person comes with the kittens, now it's easy with Safe at Home because they're going to tell us their address and they're going to be a part of the whole solution. And we're going to try to get them to trap, by the way. Like our goal is to, oh, here are the traps, have fun. No, but here are the traps, here's the spay neuter, you know, all of that. Like that's more than anything is to get them to do it. But if they won't, we're going to bring in volunteers and some staff, but the mothers of the kittens. The other ones are anyone, when you think about targeted, it's anyone who calls the shelter with a cat issue. that cat is now a targeted cat. So our goal is to have that person call and say, I got a cat in my backyard, or whatever the scenario is. Oh, would you go to the spay neuter clinic instead? That's a targeted TNR or whatever. So we're going to start building that way, because we really do want to. I mean, the intake in Long Beach dramatically dropped from like thousands and thousands of kittens. A couple years it hit, we kind of plateaued, and then it just, so that's our goal. And you gotta do a lot of work to make that happen.
In light of the 2020 that we all had, I would love to know, here it is May, the dreaded beginning of kitten season. I would love to know what you're seeing in LA, Christy, and what everyone else on the call is seeing in their neck of the woods, because we've been making a lot of predictions about what kittens.
Intake is up, honeymoon is over.
Yeah, we've been making a lot of predictions and trying to figure out, are we going to be real bad off? Are we not going to see any big delay? What are you guys all seeing now that May is here for kittens? What's it like in LA?
Intake is up.
Kittens born in field, you're seeing up?
Is it back to where it was prior to COVID, or is it just up from where it's been?
We started looking at like the April numbers just recently. So, I mean, we're already like full. Best Friends is full. This did obviously not happen last year. So, and there's a lot of wonderful groups in Los Angeles who are stepping up, like so many amazing groups. And we're like, oh, they got in today, like, but it's definitely, people accepted the managed intake last year because it was COVID. They're pushing back. They're like, no, you have to take these kittens. So I just think it's gonna take more pivoting and more figuring out and deeper conversations with the public about better outcomes.
Kathy in Canada's got still reduced numbers so far. That's fabulous. Erica's got going back to pre-COVID despite more resources being available. Stacy's got general numbers just over last year and nearing previous year. Lots of kittens coming in through rehome or adopt a pet.
We've been sending a lot of people to adopt a pet for that, by the way. A lot.
This is also a great reason to keep track of your data, no? So we can look back and see how our kitten season is looking year over year, and if the hard work that all of us are putting in is paying off.
Yeah. I think that my prediction, and I could be totally wrong, is that I don't think it's going to go back to, I mean, in Los Angeles City, we have 6 city shelters, not to be confused with the 7 county shelters, the 2 largest shelter systems in the country. We were in LA City alone, they were taking in, I think in 2019, 13,500 8 weeks and under. It was just untenable. Like, no matter what we did, no matter what Best Friends did, no matter what, so many, I mean, Michelson Found Animal, I mean, everybody like pitching in, we just couldn't catch up. Last year, it was still hard, but the intake was 6,000. I don't think it's going to be 6,000 this year. My prediction, it's not going to be 13, but it's not going to be 6. I know there's my crystal ball.
Yeah.
Not very accurate, but
Very accurate. Karen up in Portland is saying that she hasn't had any transports come through out of LA yet, that folks are still staying there empty.
because they're all little.
You
You want some bottle babies, Karen? We got them for you.
That's-
No, see?
Well, no one will fly as bottle babies. They can't fly.
That's
we
where
drive them?
That's where we are in Texas.
Not safely.
We got a late delay on kittens because of snowpocalypse.
Ah,
So we
Wait,
got
what did you say?
we got a late delay on kitten season because of the snowpocalypse.
No pocket.
But Karen, I've heard that from so many people now that demand for TNR is way up across the country. I'm hearing that it's way up, and like no one can even keep up with the calls, which is
Yeah, the group
one
here
hand-
has done, they did 50% more feral and community cats in Q1 this year than last year. And they used to do pet cats too, and they're just doing feral and community cats now. But they used to have the capacity for pets, and they're just focusing on ferals, and they can't keep up.
Why do you think that is?
the orgs, and I can't figure it out either.
Because last year we did so many fewer spays and neuters as a community. That's our best guess anyway. We know we did at least 3,000 fewer cat spay neuters last year than we did the previous year and every year for the last 10. So our guess is that there's just trickle down of those cats in the community.
It seems like some places are reporting that there are like brand new trappers coming in and people in the community that they've never heard of either. And so I'm sitting here wondering, my God, is our messaging finally getting out there that this is what you do for a community cat? Like, I'm the biggest pessimist in the world, but I'm going, really? Is it working? Is it working? You all know what to do, and you find a cat outside, you bring it in for spay neuter. That's what I would like to believe. Maybe that has a component.
Maybe it's like a new COVID hobby. Like, I got obsessed with houseplants. Maybe we have all these new people that it's like they're home and this is just their new thing is watching what cats shown up, and now they're taking them in and stuff.
Wouldn't that be nice? Instead of knitting, everyone's going to, or Netflixing, you're all going to go out and humanely trap community cats for spay and neuter.
Well, people do. I mean, the awareness is for sure different than it was even 5 years ago. With next door, I mean, we all look at our own next doors, and it's completely different. So we just got to produce more veterinarians, right?
I want to ask you one more question and really put you on the spot, because this will make you'll hate this one.
Uh-oh.
Kitten season is upon us. It is the most stressful time of the year for cat rescuers. What do we do to take care of ourselves and our staff and our teams, as well as we take care of our kittens? See, I knew you'd hate it.
Well, we just had a staff meeting this morning, and I talked about how hard it is to say no, and how we feel like we're the bad person, and how people put it on us. But I talked about how we can feel good that we gave them options, and they get to step up or not. But I used to have people, when I was first in rescue, they would say, well, this is what you do. I can't blah, blah, blah. And my friend and I would joke about, this is what you do. This is what we're doing to make like, what? So I talked about, like, these are our goals, this shelter, this population, and then anything else if we can. But we had an incredible year last year, COVID, we hit it out of the park. We serviced more 4,500 through our programs, like another 15,000 through information and hotline. We've raised more money than ever, but we were like almost dead at the end of the year. So I'm not willing to do that again for sustainability. So I talked to them about having boundaries, and it's okay to say no, and it's okay to, that's what I was talking about. We were talking about the Adopt a Pet website. I was like, give that out. You empower the public, and then you feel relieved. And I think we're less stressed. And for me, that's about self-care. That's like a life lesson for me. Not so easy.
Probably all of us on this call need a good lesson on, every now and again, boundaries and feeling okay saying no, right?
Yeah. And knowing it's hard, because we don't want to say no to the babies.
No, and talking about it, and I like to think these summits and these groups kind of give us a safe place to do that too, amongst people who understand what that feels like. So
Right.
I
Absolutely.
appreciate that on all of our calls.
The obligatory tale just went by.
I hope so, and I totally agree. And speaking of, I will be on vacation for the next 2 weeks, so Bobby and Kelly will be here. And Kelly, did you want to share quickly about the form that you created?
Sure. I just popped a link into the chat and a little bit about it, but we are taking submissions for proposals for being a speaker here at the summits. So looking forward to seeing information about your programs. And honestly, it could even be coming in and with an issue that you want people to, help you weigh in on, and we can all kind of try to put our heads together and solve it. So please, fill out the form. We would love to have you as a guest speaker.
Yeah, and share with your staff too. If you have any staff that
I do.
think are doing a great job, share that form. And yeah, we'd love to get more folks speaking. Thank you so much, Christy, and thank you, Monica. You really are just such a hero for cats and kittens, and so appreciative of your time with us today.
Your email said I was going to be speaking for 5 to 10 minutes. I had no idea of this format.
So sorry.
Yeah, we could probably change that.
It'll be me. It was me firing question after question of you. It's fun for
amazing.
Me.
Yeah, we
getting fired at. I was like, ha! Christy gets.
I need to update that language. What's next week, Monica?
Next week we're talking all about community cats. Again, right, Kelly?
But you're gonna go through like the questions that you all have put together, right? Something like that.
Christy and I are building a webinar about the top 10 questions and criticisms that shelters are getting regarding community cat programs. So we're putting that together. But next week, I believe on our summit is all about community cats.
What else is there really? No, just kidding.
I mean, y'all like it.
It's very needed right now. I think it's a lot of where the heat is coming from. So really appreciate you being here next week too, Monica. And thanks everyone. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you for asking. Bye.
Thanks, Christy. You're the best.
You too. Bye.